Hello? There we go. Hello and good evening. How are you guys doing tonight? Welcome to Miami Beach and Art Basel. Yeah. I want to thank my friend John and his wife Gail for bringing me down to Miami from the freezing cold New York City. Did anybody else come down from New York today? Woohoo! If you haven't ever seen Nautilus or Ocean magazine or Plantings, I encourage you to seek it out because they're not just beautiful magazines. They're the stories. I feel like I'm talking about Playboy magazine now. I don't read it just for the pictures. The articles are amazing, and they really are. They're extraordinary people, and they assemble extraordinary people to make contributions to that magazines. So I encourage you to seek them out. It's my pleasure to introduce my new friend, Nicole Stott. I'm always nervous I'm going to say Scout. Nicole Stott, who is not just an astronaut, she's an aquanaut and an artist. And Victor Vescovo, who I met today, who is a deep sea ocean explorer, a mountain climber, and an industrial venture capitalist. Please welcome them both to the stage. Here, it's not really a stage.
Oh, they're gonna yell at us. All right. We're waiting for our moderator, which we discovered there's not one.
No, so it's just Nicole and I speaking. So I think we'll just kick this off of why we are here. And I think we're here to enjoy with you a discussion about not just the ocean, but also space and the land in between and the interconnections between them. So I guess I'll start it off by starting a conversation with my new friend, Nicole, who has actually spent more time underwater than I have. And we'll start
It's all relative, right?
Yeah, well, we'll start with your own experience in space and the ocean, and what do you see as the key connections between them both?
Well, very fortunate to have experienced those two extraordinary vantage points. What we like to think of as the inner space experience of living underwater for an extended period of time, and that was in preparation for going to outer space. And as it turns out, living underwater that way, saturated in this place where you can't just escape to the surface, is absolutely the best environment, extreme environment to prepare you to live in outer space.
And how long were you down there?
So we were down there for 18 days.
With how many people?
With 6 people.
In a space about the size of a large RV?
Like school busy, yeah.
Wow. School
busy sized place, which is about the size of one of the modules on the International Space Station. And so then this place where you're living underwater, where everything about it is a really beautiful parallel to what it's going to be like to live on a spaceship, where you're in a relatively confined space with your crewmates. You're in a place where you can't just open the door and jump in the minivan and drive home. You are in a place where if something goes wrong, you have to deal with it in that place with your crew. You can't just go out without special equipment on. That's the same as on the space station. And all of the work we were doing there, the experiments, the science, the way we were living and working together is just a wonderful parallel to what it's like to live in space. Right. And then I had the chance to live on the International Space Station. On my first mission, it was a little over 3 months. And then on my second flight, which was the final flight of the Space Shuttle Discovery, we went back and we were only there for 2 weeks, which I will never complain about 2 weeks in space. But man, they had to pull my clawing hands off the hatch to get me back. But I love it because your experience, I think, is the extreme of everything, right? The extreme of the depth of the ocean. I mean, I was at 60 feet. I might have been there for 18 days, but I was at 60 feet, off the coast of Key Largo. You've gone to like what we know of as the depth of the ocean, and then to the highest place the closest place to the sun on Earth. And then spent a little time in space as well.
Very brief time in space.
Well,
But I think what's extraordinary is just some of the facts and figures, and we'll get to why this is important. But if you think about when you go from sea level, where we are now, to outer space, you're going from 1 atmosphere of pressure to 0, a vacuum. When you go to the very bottom of the ocean, 11,000 meters down at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, you're going from 1 atmosphere to 1,100. So the pressure on a craft and being able to survive that for repeated dives is an extraordinary engineering feat. And where I'm going with this is that one of the big links between deep ocean exploration and space is the fact that the harshest environments in our solar system are in the deep ocean trenches of the Earth and on planets off of Earth. So if we are ever exploring Europa or Ganymede, looking for life, not just fossilized remains on Mars, but actual living organisms that are not from Earth, they will probably be in environments more similar to what we find in the oceans, especially the harsh deep oceans, than we will things that live up here. And so that's one connection I think we have in ocean research and space travel and space exploration. What other similarities do you think there are? Why is it important that we don't make a binary choice between space exploration or ocean exploration, but that we must do both?
well, I think there's a number of reasons. We've talked about some of them before coming here tonight, but there's one. When my friend Christina's here, my husband who's here, when we're out talking to our friends about, why do we just explore in general, right? That's this human thing that we do, and we can all argue about that, whether we like it or not. It's true.
No,
we do it. I like it. And everything we do in outer space is ultimately about improving life on Earth. And in one way or another, that connection is going to allow us to learn more about what is under the surface of this planet as well, whether that's for us to be able to explore it. And I love the story you shared with me earlier about the first time you dove deep like that, where you got there. The whole point was to get there, right? To get to that place. And then, as John later said, to get safely home
and get
back up. But when you got there, it was this, and you can describe it, I would like you to, but this sense of awe and wonder just in where you were, right? And then realizing that, man, sometimes we just don't know what we're going to discover or why being in that place is important. And I think that's a pretty compelling thing just from the human side of exploration, without even talking about the science of what goes on between these two places of outer space and inner space.
Right. Yeah, I think on one of our dives down to the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, we were astounded by the fact that many people thought it would be lifeless or relatively lifeless. And what we found instead were extensive colonies of bacteria that actually you could see with the naked eye that were living off the rocks. Now don't forget that a photon can't penetrate more than 6,000 meters of water. So there is, literally no light at the bottom of the ocean. And yet here we had not just single organisms, but colonies living with non-photosynthesis life, living off methane coming out of the rocks, the minerals in the actual rocks. And this is what we will find, hopefully, on other planets. Yeah. And it's just extraordinary that that exists on our planet. When you go out into space, you're hoping to find a living organism. Every time we dove in a deep ocean trench, we found new species because no one has gone there. 75% of our oceans are completely unexplored and unmapped. And yet 70% of the world is ocean, which if you do the math, more than half of our planet Earth is completely and utterly unexplored. And yet we know the surface of Mars like we know something on our Google Maps. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, and what I like about us understanding the surface of Mars is that it might give us some clue as to what is going on under the surface of our own oceans here, and perhaps how to prepare for dealing with the things that could go on in the future if we don't mind ourselves, maybe.
Well, let me ask the question that often comes up to anyone that explores in these extreme environments. They say, what you're doing is interesting, it's fascinating to read about, but it's extremely expensive. We have so many other problems here on land, so many real problems. Shouldn't we be addressing those first? What would you answer the critics of spending on NASA or with NOAA or all these other projects How does it help? How does it affect the price of beer?
Well, hopefully that's not our most important concern.
It is to certain people.
It is. Well, and I think, when we think about what's being spent, and it's all relative, right? We were talking today about the cost of a World Cup being $200 billion, and yet all of what's spent on NASA every year is less than 10% of that, right? For everything that NASA does, that has a return that's almost, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's substantive, right? And if you just look at the space part of that, and I looked really hard when I flew to the space station, because I was all about, I love the adventure of launching on the rocket and floating and flying in space. But I think the thing that really excited me about being an astronaut and going and living and working in space was the work we're doing there, right? That it really, all of it in one way or another is about improving life on Earth. And there's not a lot of things you can talk about that are that way. And I think the same is true in one way or another when we're exploring the depths of our oceans, or when we're exploring places terrestrially that we've never been to before.
As an ocean person, I have to throw in there that while the budget for NASA for 2024 is projected to be $27 billion, the entire budget for NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency, is $8 billion. So it's a fraction of what even NASA's is.
I know.
And yet it's here on Earth. So I had to put that pitch in.
But that $27 billion is not just about space, right? And then a lot of it is in partnership with organizations like NOAA, which I think when we talk about the value of what we're doing off planet, on planet, under the surface of our oceans, there's this critical need to understand our place in space, right? And so what we do with the satellites, the sensors that are monitoring all of the activity in the ocean and on Earth, we're doing what we need to measure the vital signs of our planet.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, here's another statistic that blows a lot of people's minds, which is ocean is 70% of our planet. And the average depth is about 6,000 meters. And the hadal depths, the depths below 6,000 meters, where I typically tend to go, is only 2% of the seafloor, the deep ocean trenches. So people say, well, that doesn't sound very significant. Why does it even matter? They actually hold 40% of the water. And in the last 10 years, I think it's become more and more apparent that as we discuss climate change, that a great surprise has happened when people realize how much heat the ocean is absorbing, much more than we expected. And I think part of that is the fact that a lot of it is going into the deep ocean. We do not yet really understand how heat circulation works between the atmosphere, space, and all elements of the ocean. And that's why I think we keep getting surprised, which is why research is so important, because we really don't know that much. We have the hubris of thinking we know how things work when we really don't.
And I think one of the things that comes from exploring, whether it's outer space or inner space, is that we discover, if we allow ourselves, without the ego, we discover how much we don't know about what we think we know, right? There's a lot more that we don't know than what we even think we know.
Right. And so many times people say, well, again, why do we do all this exploration? What does all this egghead scientist stuff have to do with us? There's another organization that we're familiar with, the Schmidt Ocean Institute. They did a fascinating study just off the coast of Hawaii, where they sent some probes down and they sampled bacteria from relatively deep waters, I believe 2,000 to 4,000 meters. Well, why is that interesting? Well, when they brought them up, they did some experiments on them. And it turns out that many of these organisms that they were able to isolate were completely unrecognizable by the human immune system. They didn't even get recognized. Why is that interesting? Well, if you're looking for drug delivery or any number of things that you would want to do in the human body without the immune system attacking it, maybe you will use some of the techniques that these organisms already have. You don't know when you conduct exploration or science where it will lead. So in many respects, explorers like my colleague here and others, our job is to go out and to find and to seek and to bring it back. We don't know where it will go, but we're hoping that one day it could be useful. And
we talked about, it's funny, we were talking a little bit earlier about, kind of the direction we could take tonight. And, some of the greatest discoveries that have ever happened, right, have been not because the hypothesis was what was realized, but because in the lab, or I look at, on the space station now, where we've evolve to where you actually have the flexibility to look at the alternative paths, where it doesn't go the way you're planning, and the most amazing discovery comes from it, from the surprise of it. And that can be the surprise of kind of the human reaction to something, the awe and wonder that's associated with it, or the hardcore science that's evolving from just being able to be flexible in a place that might be a little different to what we're used to.
Right. Well, how can we bring it back for the people that are in the audience that obviously have interest in this topic and they're here to learn perhaps something? What would you say we can do to allow them the opportunity? How can they participate? How can they help us move forward? If there's one thing I try to communicate in a lot of the speaking that I do to people that are interested is human beings are extraordinarily capable, much more capable than they give themselves credit for. I am not an Olympic athlete, I'm not a Nobel laureate, but through persistence and some degree of success, I've been able to do some interesting things. Everyone can do that, I think, if they apply themselves and have some degree of imagination. So what advice would you give people of how they can contribute to the passion for exploring and just trying to push us forward as a species?
This might sound really simple, but and I think it comes from the complexity of it all. You go to the bottom of the ocean, that is a super complex thing to do. It's pretty complicated to do that, to get back safely. I mean, it is.
It's easy to go down once.
Yeah. And then, and to go to space, to launch, 7 million pounds of exploding rocket stuff underneath you, to trust that that's going to work, to know your family's watching you as you're trusting that's going to work, to live and work in space even for a short period of time without even doing the science, get home safe. That's a really complex thing. But in the end, I think there's this kind of human acknowledgement of the simplicity in it too. Like, I remember getting to space, and I'm counting on this being something that you experienced too in your time on flying with Blue Origin, where
noise, it's
oh my
really
gosh.
loud.
And I'm so happy that I call it the flippy doos. Like, I'm like, okay, don't go to space for the time you're going to be there and then spend all your time flipping around. I want your face in front of that window, right? Because there's this reality check of being a human in that place, of floating in front of that window, experiencing our planetary home in a way that you're like, oh my gosh, we live on a planet. Right now, we're all sitting in this theater, we're on a planet in space. We're all Earthlings. Only border that matters, that thin blue line of atmosphere, that veil-thin divider between space and sea. And, that I think the action we all can take, what we learn when we're on a spaceship or when we're on a submersible, is that it's really, really important for us to figure out what our role as crewmates in this place is, not passengers in the place. So whether you're on a spaceship, a mechanical spaceship, orbiting the planet, or you're going down to the depths of the ocean, or you're right here, feet on the surface of it, figuring out how to acknowledge that really important role, accept it, and then take action in response to it, at being a crewmate.
Yeah, I think just to restate, it's not just being a passive observer in the world, but to be an active participant, and ideally a positive force for change. I know everybody says that over and over again, but the issue is you really do have to make a commitment to do that in your own life, and you have the ability to do it, even if it's in a small way, but help everyone else move forward as a crew member. And what you were describing, there actually is a word for that. In fact, I believe it was the Apollo astronauts that coined the term the overview effect. And just being in space for 10 minutes or so, I can tell you it's a real thing. And what it describes is when you get above the atmosphere and you're seeing a yellow sun on a black sky and you're looking down on the Earth and seeing the incredibly thin layer of atmosphere. It's a beautiful sight, but also you realize the fragility of where it is that we live. And you look down, you see no borders, and it really gives you almost a soulful feeling that we should be taking better care of our planet and of ourselves. It's a real thing. And I have a new term that I call the underview effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is when you go to the very bottom of the ocean, it's a different feeling, where it feels absolutely ancient. And you're in an environment that if you did not have this wonderful technology surrounding you, you would literally be annihilated before your brain can even process it. It doesn't want you there. But it's ancient and it's old and it doesn't care. But we care, and we care about each other. So the combination of the two has made me deeply appreciative of having a life on a wonderful planet in what I still believe is a wonderful country that has potential, despite all of its difficulties. And if we just took care of each other even a little bit better, the world would be a much, much better place.
Yeah. Have you ever met Frank White?
I have not.
Yeah, so who,
he
based
coined the
on
term.
the Apollo astronauts' experience and his own, I mean, the revelation for him was flying in an airplane and thinking about what it would be like in the future with these O'Neillian habitats and with people exploring, further off Earth, what the response to, seeing our planetary spaceship would be.
Right.
And it's absolutely it is a spiritual experience.
Well,
I actually, in whatever way you want to define that word, but I really think it is. It's about the connection you make. You're in this place. Like for me, I'd like to think that the space station is not as far as I will go. I'm hopeful to find my way on the moon someday. But that being in this place that at the time is the farthest I've ever been from home, and looking back at Earth as a planet and thinking, oh my gosh, I feel more connected to this place here than I had like with my feet right on it, and wanting to carry that with me forward forever, and it's exactly the interconnectivity of everything. There is that veil thin blue line, but then you could argue, okay, well, we've got this moon that's our partner in space. That is what's allowing us to just be sitting with gravity on this stage tonight, is controlling the tides of the oceans, and what I'm pretty sure you had to consider as you're, traveling deep into it. And these relationships, this interconnection that just extends out to what we know or think we know of our universe. And it's a pretty compelling thing to consider. My sense is that everybody in this room already knows that their role is as crewmates. Yep. To just be here tonight and in this place. And when I think about John and the work, and David and others here with Nautilus and that storytelling, I think that's another thing that's really important. This connection we can make to things that seem so maybe impossible or unreachable can be explored through stories with each other in a way that the science of it might not necessarily convey to us.
Right. I think that brings up a good point, where sometimes we're often asked, why go to the expense and the trouble of having human-occupied vehicles, either in space or in the ocean? You can do it far cheaper and maybe even more effectively by using robotic devices. I'm not going to argue that they can do some extraordinary things. But as James Cameron once said, he said, no kid ever grows up desiring to be a robot. There is something about storytelling and direct human experience in these extreme environments that is actually critically important to us as a species and culture and evolving. The most watched television event in human history was what? Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. Not when the first moon lander landed on the moon, when a human being descended a ladder and put his foot on another planet. And the same in the ocean. It wasn't the first time a robot went at the bottom of the ocean. It was the first time Captain Don Walsh did. Those are important moments, and allows us to communicate as humans, as we are tonight, what it was like, why it was important. And that's why you need both, to do the science, but also to convey the human experience. So I'd like to ask you, what was, in your space career, the most disappointing and the most amazing experiences that you had in space?
Wow. Disappointing. That's a really difficult one, because I found everything to be better than I even expected it to be. Disappointing, just like what I wish could have happened, was, I really wish my family could have been there with me. It'll seem a little bit trivial, and I think in the grand, but there's this, this need to share that kind of experience. And when you can't have those people you care the most about with you there, that seems disappointing.
Interesting.
The most
amazing, wondrous, joyful.
Everything. I think there was, I don't know if you remember, Chris, like the first call home, my son was 7 when I flew in space the first time. And of course, my husband and I tried to make sure that he felt like he was part of the crew, even though he wasn't going to travel, took him to all the, the training stuff where you actually look like an astronaut, And then, of course, he got to travel with me places. He knew the people I was working with, the work I was going to do. But that that opportunity to call home the first time and to speak to him from that place, that was extraordinary. And to try to describe where I was and what I was feeling, the most liberating feeling to float and fly that way, and how Earth looked like this, the brightest light bulb you could ever imagine, like splattered with all the colors that Earth to be, and almost to where you turn the light bulb on, you got to kind of look away at first to let your eyes adjust against the blackest black you've ever seen, and how cool is that, and trying to relate to him what I was seeing and experiencing. But overall, I think that's part of the lesson in the end of being crew, though, too. Like acknowledging that the people that aren't there with you in the ship are also part of your crew. And how by behaving like crewmates, we really have the power to create a future that's as beautiful as it looks from space as well. And I think all of the experience just kind of wraps up into that lesson for me.
Right. I'll just give my
The ocean,
yeah, in
space.
the ocean, yeah. The most wondrous and fun experience was we had one of my robotic landers that accompanied the human-occupied vehicle down to the bottom of the Java Trench. And when we were looking at the video later, we saw this creature, which we knew had never been filmed before. It was definitely a new species. And it came right towards the lander, was making a bead for it. And then right when it got to the lander, it turned to 90 degrees. It looked like a big head of a jellyfish, but it had a cable, a living cable stranded from it. I think it had a foot on the bottom. This is a bizarre creature.
Had it ever seen light before?
No,
do you think?
it had lived in complete darkness. And it was on BBC and all this stuff. But I'll never forget sitting in the control room watching this film with my chief scientist, who's the world's expert, Dr. Alan Jameson, on anything that lives below 6,000 meters. And I recall him, our mouths are agape when we're looking at this amazing new creature. And I said, "What is that?" And in his brilliant Scottish accent, he says, "I don't have a effing clue." That's felt special, that we were out there finding new species. And then on the disappointing note, I simply have to confess, and this is kind of a downer, but it's reality. Within 15 minutes of my first dive to the very bottom of Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, it's widely reported, but I saw human contamination. Yeah. Pretty sure it was plastic. Undoubtedly, it was a piece of packaging because it had a stylized letter S on it. And it was in the most remote place on Earth. And it beat me there. And that highlighted something that we later learned after diving into 17 deep ocean trenches and taking water samples, is that microplastics were in every single water sample that we had from the very bottom of these trenches, which means simply that it's a pernicious problem. And there's now more plastic in the ocean than there is biomass. And I don't mean to make a big evangelical point on this, but it's a true statement, that with that amount of material in the ocean, it will get into our food chain, it will start affecting us. And we simply have to do better on how can we contain that problem. I'm not saying do away with plastics, because they're so damn cheap and so damn useful, but we simply have to figure out other methodologies to prevent them from ever going in the ocean where you can never eradicate their presence. So that was disappointing, but that's part of the reason that we dove, is to find that out and to confirm it.
So how do you think, like continuing to explore the way you have to those depths, can help solve that problem?
Well, one part is simply, I'm more of a technologist. I'm not a marine scientist, and my job is to keep pushing the boundary of technology. Right now, there are only 2 vessels in the world that can go to the very bottom of the ocean and study it. One is the private vehicle that I helped develop with Triton submarines, and the other is owned by the Chinese government. That's it, which is extraordinary. And if I hadn't spent my own money, and it was all self-funded, to build my vehicle, there'd be only one, and it'd be owned by the Chinese government. That shouldn't be the case. We should have many, many more vehicles studying many more deep parts of this ocean and shallow parts of the ocean so we can understand it more. But there simply isn't the interest by so many. There's so many other distractions, it appears. And we just need more attention. And people in the audience that are listening to us here, hopefully you're part of the vanguard of simply supporting more research into space and into deep ocean so that we can learn these things and not spend money on a lot of other things that may not have the same yield. That's my own thought, but I'm biased.
Yeah. I think it's true. The awareness thing, I think, is huge. I mean, you here tonight just sharing that story, I mean, we may have seen a picture or something, but I mean, for you to share that story, it reminds me of, do you know David Lichtwager? So he's a photographer, and I actually interviewed him for my book, but it was, he took this iconic photo of an albatross was a dead bird with its belly open with all the plastic inside of it, right? And then his partner took the kind of the complementary image of all of that plastic spread out on this white, piece of paper next to this animal. And I think that it's just this sad image of what the impact is.
Yeah, people
right?
just cannot treat the ocean like it's a garbage can. You just simply can't. We have an expression where
Yeah.
I'm from in Texas, and it's "don't mess with Texas." It was a garbage campaign. I wish we had the same thing for the ocean, where people wouldn't just treat it like something you throw it in the ocean and it vanishes. It doesn't vanish. It stays there, and it descends down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're doing a little bit on time, but I wondered maybe we could open it up for questions from the audience, since they might have some questions about some of the places that we've been or experiences we've had. Anyone at all? We can't really see very well because we're being blinded by some spotlights, but if people would like to...
Well, and if we do, and in the meantime, it's like just really to thank the folks that have brought us here tonight too. I'm looking at stuff in there, and I don't know where Jody is with with Viking, and of course we've got Schmidt and Nautilus,
Nautilus.
for sure, and I can't
Omega.
see. Did I said Stefan with Omega, right? And but I mean, I think about the work that's going on, with each of those partners in like this presentation this evening, which is not only sharing like the awe and wonder that's out there in the world, whether it's through this connection with time, and again, talk about space and sea,
You've got to have an analog time instrument for safety.
or journeys. I'm looking for Jody. Where is she? Journeys on on the ocean, or exploring a place like Antarctica, or getting you out of what you think of as the norm for yourselves, and experiencing the world around us that way. What you mentioned about Schmidt and this, the ability to see things that are below the surface that I can't even imagine encountering, right? But sharing that story. We did something through Schmidt, which was with the 11th Hour Racing Team, who did win the ocean race this year, where their whole mission, aside from winning a race around the world, was to provide scientific evidence of what's going on in the ocean. And part of that storytelling, which I think was so compelling, was, you tell me again what you call the undersea version of the overview effect. The underview effect. They were speaking to this ocean effect. So here you got these 3 levels again of acknowledging this experience of our planet from that perspective. And, and then the stories that are happening with Nautilus, if you, again, like Matthew said at the beginning, I encourage you to pick up any one of those magazines. Look online at what they're presenting. It really presents our planet in a way that should be inspiring for all of us as crew.
And don't just read. Yeah. Get out in the world. Push your boundaries. Yeah. Go do something you would never do before.
Some of those magazines are in the gift bag.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be a party without a swag bag.
That's true.
I'm going to help them to see if there was any questions.
Any questions at all?
Somebody right there.
Shout them out. Yes, go ahead. Sure.
Yeah.
I see a hand.
You want to go first? Go ahead.
Go.
So you both talked about the plastic problem at the bottom of the ocean. What do you think about the waste problem in space?
What do I think? The waste problem in space. Yeah, we've got, I think the way the term is orbital debris, right? And for the most part, if we could get that under control, it could be the best way for us to dispose of waste as well through atmospheric reentry, but we're not going to have that conversation. What I think is that we know now that we have to acknowledge the debris in space. A lot of the images we see, I think, convey it in a way that isn't necessarily what's really happening out there, but does bring to life the awareness that we need to be more thoughtful in the way we deploy our spacecraft, or the way we live and work in space. And that is happening every single space company that I know of is actively participating in how you reduce that footprint in space.
When I go to elementary schools and teach environmentalism, the easiest way to say it is, when you throw something away, where is away? There is no away, is what the children tell me. There's only this place. Yes, sir. So,
I heard a lot, and I'm very aware of the deficit of funding for NOAA compared to NASA. I think we focus a lot on research and research funding. I'm curious what you see as exploration serving the purpose of inspiring entrepreneurship as well. Because Victor, for example, your endeavor was an entrepreneurial venture in itself, right?
Yeah, there has to be a fine balance between money that is spent by public agencies purely on research and development, which is chronically underfunded, and those that actually have a bit of a commercial angle. I think one thing that I'm very happy about was the fact that we were able to develop a system that I was actually able to sell to a research organization, Inkfish, by Gabe Newell. So everyone should understand that research, development, science, exploration, it cannot be a charitable endeavor indefinitely. Eventually, things have to work mathematically and economically, because that's what funds things. So the cost of things is actually incredibly important. So we have to be smart in our exploration to make sure that things stay within budget, that it's a cost-effective trade-off, and that we allow private sector eventually to have the ability to do interesting things as well. So I think it's a partnership between government and private. We can't do it either alone.
Which is what's so great about what's going on in space now. That's
Agreed.
the public-private partnership. But I think it speaks to, when you talk about the amount of money it takes to do certain things, when you look at the relative numbers, it's interesting, I maybe eyes glaze over or something, but when you can, we talked about this today, when you can, somehow we generally accept that, $200,000 for a soccer tournament is okay. Or $200 billion. I'm sorry, $200 billion for World Cup is okay, but the idea of spending more than $8 billion on NOAA for undersea research seems absurd.
Well, I mean, it goes to the point, SpaceX could not be doing what it's doing unless NASA had been invented and did the space program. So government can prime the pump. And most people don't realize that the Panama Canal was originally a private sector venture that failed. It was only when the United States government, with its massive resources, dove in. They were the only organization that could have built the Panama Canal, but now it's a private enterprise. So those examples just show that there can be partnerships between government and private sector, but neither should vilify the other. They're mutually supportive.
And I think that's happening really visibly in space now.
Finally.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be one of the things that helps lead us to facilitating more and more commercial activity that can take on that role of solving some of the greatest planetary challenges we have with the resources, the technology from space, or perhaps from under the ocean, the solutions that are there just waiting to be deployed.
Amazing. Nicole, Victor, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Matthew.
And now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce and present one of the most important violinists in the world, Asian Nimura.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aichi Nimura, violinist and a UNESCO Artist for Peace. It is such a great honor for me to perform in this concert for the oceans. For the first music, I would like to perform a piece composed by Eugene Izai, a violinist of 19th and 20th centuries. This composition was dedicated to also violinist Manuel Quiroga, who was born in Pontevedra of Spain, which is a city overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Eugene Izai probably composed this music with images of the ocean's dynamics and energy and murmuring of waves the oxygen bubbles created under the sea, and sometimes the harshness of the ocean. Another thing I personally feel in the melancholic part of this music is suffering that many marine creatures facing today in the crisis of oceans. I would like to play this music with hope that people around the world will take action to protect the oceans, and like this music with its happy ending, the oceans, which I love deeply, will be stored to healthy state once again. I spent every summer in the United States for studying music from 9 to 16 years old through the good kind of great violinist, Mr. Isaac Stern. Things what I saw at those moments were the aspects of distinguished artists who were engaging positively in charitable activities. I was very, very impressed by the aspects, and I cherished an ambition that I wanted to make use my music for contribution to the society when I would become a violinist in the future. This year marks 25 years since I was appointed UNESCO Artist for Peace as the first Japanese. For 25 years, I have always been performing with a wish that my music can be helpful in conveying the principles of UNESCO to many people. Well, when I say a word wish, it always reminds me the Pinocchio that I watched when I was a child. In 18th and 19th century, there was a great violinist whose name was Niccolo Paganini. A whole of Europe was enthusiastic about him. Paganini was born in Genoa, a port city in Italy, same as Christopher Columbus. Paganini left behind compositions that evoke images of the sea. He must have seen every day the Gulf of Liguria since he was a small child. I would like to play Paganini's music. I hope you could enjoy with this music, which is filled with various techniques, not only listening to it, but also with your eyes. I would like to express my sincere appreciations to the organizers, sponsors, and staffs for inviting me this concert for the oceans. I would like to make an effort to do activities for ocean conservation continuously in the future. A little early, so I wish everyone a Merry Christmas.
Asia Nimura. Is Aaron Arcello here?
No, good. Okay.
Oh, good. You left the lights on in your car. Would you like to join us down here on this? It's not really a stage, but let's call it one. Are you coming down?
I am.
There we go. Hi, Aaron.
Hi. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Matthew. Hi.
Nice to meet you. Hey, I think you've got some things to say.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here on this stage on behalf of two great organizations, SC Johnson, for whom I work and have worked for the last 10 years, as well as Conservation International. And we're about to play a film for you that is a adaptation of a museum exhibition that's currently on permanent display at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago called The Blue Paradox. And it's a immersive experience on the ocean plastic crisis. And you heard a little while ago about the fact that plastic waste was discovered at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. We've explored, well, I should say that our chairman and fifth generation owner, Fisk Johnson, has explored the far reaches of the planet, testing for microplastics and plastic waste. He's searched the Sahara Desert. He's searched and tested in kind of far-flung areas of the ocean. And it's an issue that, as a company and as an organization, it's our #1 priority. And so we created this exhibition to bring awareness to the issue and really challenge people to dive into the complexities of the problem as well as the trade-offs and complexities of the solution. So what you'll see here is a 9-minute adaptation of a really incredible exhibition. If you're ever in Chicago, I highly recommend you seek it out. And this is the kind of the world premiere of the planetarium dome adaptation of that experience. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope it provokes some thought and some, consider taking action on your part. All right, thank you.
It's what we're drawn to and where we come from. All life, human or otherwise, is connected to the ocean. Without it, no living creature would exist. The ocean covers 70% of the Earth's surface and contains 99% of the living space on the planet. Yet, only a tiny fraction has been explored by humans. It is home to nearly all living things, from the smallest microorganisms to the magnificent blue whale. Nearly 3/4 of our biggest cities are by the sea, with almost half the world's population living within 60 miles of the coastline. It influences our weather, produces the air we breathe. And stores 50 times more carbon than our atmosphere. Our rain, drinking water, and much of our food is ultimately provided by the ocean. It is the life force behind every living thing and ecosystem on the planet. The ocean gives us life in every beautiful, surprising, fascinating, and spellbinding way imaginable. But as much as we depend on the oceans to survive, future generations depend on us. The plastic pollution problem has become a global crisis, and disruptive change is needed now. What difference can a drop in the ocean make? Everything. The sheer volume of plastics reaching the ocean has grown to impact marine life, ecosystems, and food chains all around the world. The constant flow of plastic into the ocean has reached a crisis level. Over 14 million tons of plastic are dumped into the oceans each year. That's 888 pounds of plastic every second. Ingestion has been found in nearly all marine wildlife groups. Recent studies have found plastic showing up even in the human bloodstream and lower respiratory tract. The impact of this is currently unknown. Plastic has become indispensable, but overdependence on it threatens our future. The solutions to the problem are riddled with complexities, and it will take businesses, governments, and people to solve these challenges together. We are at a tipping point, which means that we still have the opportunity to tip things back in the right direction if we act now. Dr. Sylvia Earle. We must change how we produce, use, reuse, recycle plastics, and must also use more alternative materials. Our habit of producing and consuming enormous amounts of plastic while properly disposing of so little of it must drastically change. The power of choice. Even small adjustments in our behavior can lead to powerful change. The power of innovation. Discover inspiring new ways industry is helping to reduce our ocean plastic impact. The power of us. We can all connect with our elected representatives to demand change. Our oceans give life to every living thing on the planet. We all must act before it's too late. Thank you for visiting the Blue Paradox. Please visit blueparadox.com to learn more and take action.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Is that Doug coming down? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Doug Roberts, the CEO and President of Frost Science.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so welcome to Frost Museum of Science. This is the Philip Patricia Frost Museum of Science. We've been here about 7 years. I hope you all enjoyed this amazing planetarium dome. It's my favorite place. I'm an astronomer, and so I never get tired of seeing amazing works in the dome. And this is my first violin concert in the dome, so that was really, really special. I'm really happy to invite everyone here and host this amazing presentation, primarily because the core of what Frost Science does is so well aligned to what Nautilus does and what this event tonight is all about. It's really about the connections of science, art, culture, and music. And science at its core is really reflecting our human a desire to understand the world around us. And a lot of that the way that we understand it, sometimes I'm a scientist that comes from numbers and mathematics, but there's a huge amount that comes from our appreciation of beauty, and that beauty is in the way that we observe the universe around us, and the way artists interpret the universe, and so you'll see some of that tonight as well. In the planetarium, our aquarium, and our museum, and I think you'll see when you go upstairs our awe-inspiring view of Miami, the oceans around us. We think that we change a person after seeing these beautiful places and experiencing these amazing pieces of art and science, and people hopefully leave with a greater appreciation of the world and the universe. Tonight, all those aspects come together, and I really can't wait to show you and for you to see it outside. We're so thankful for the support and engagement of UNESCO for this event. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Madam Director General of UNESCO, Audrey Azoulay. Ms. Azoulay is a graduate of the École Nationale d'Administration and the Paris Institut d'Études Politiques, and she holds a diploma of business administration from the University of Lancaster. She supported culture throughout her career, first focusing on French public broadcasting system, and then as an advisor to the French president, she developed a protection plan for heritage sites and involving youth in access to culture and art. Today, she leads UNESCO in promoting science, culture, art, and education across the globe. Please join me in welcoming Madam Director General.
Lucky me, thanks. Good evening. Please bear with me because the first time also I make a speech in English in a planetarium, but I'll do my best. First, I'd like to tell you how happy I am to be here in a place which, as Doug just said, connects many things that are important for me, many things that are important for UNESCO's mandate: culture, education, science, coming all together in places like the Frost Museum of Science, places that develop the scientific culture we so much need in all of our societies. Also a pleasure to be in Miami, especially this week when the world of contemporary art meets, and where we will have the chance to see here in the museum a very special exhibition where through arts we can have a different view, a different window on the oceans, a window that can take us closer to the reality of the ocean. Sometimes it shows their beauty, sometimes their fragility. It's this blue paradox we just saw on screen. But I think anyhow the vision that is brought by the arts is different than what science alone can do, information alone can do. We can see differently, we can see further, we can see sometimes better through the arts, and it's been true since the Cousteau movies with whom we discovered, for some of us, the oceans, or through the work of designers, of painters, of photographers, of documentary filmmakers. So I'd like to thank all those that made this exhibition possible, the Schmidt Institute and the vessel on which the artist traveled. Of course, the Nautilus magazine, all those who participated, the artists, of course, first and foremost, and also Art Basel Miami, which gave us a specific place and a corner at the entrance of the fair with a lot of visibility for this exhibition that we will see. Also, a few words about UNESCO and our work on the ocean. UNESCO is culture, science, and education. And on the scientific part, we have a fantastic intergovernmental oceanographic commission, which gathers 150 member states. And at a time like those we live today, where there is so many crises and fractures and difficulties for countries to work together on a bilateral basis, they can be united for the science under the auspices of UNESCO. I'll give you one example. We have in our ocean programs global database on marine biodiversity. And this is a database which then creates science which is open, accessible to researchers around the world, and which is fed by all our member states. And I'm very happy to announce that we will step up our collaboration with the US regarding this marine biodiversity database, thanks to the increased support of NOAA, of the Geological Survey of the Institute of the United States. And this is one of the consequences of the very good news of the return of the US to our organization a few months ago. There are many more examples. Yes, thank you. Many more examples like that, because this language of science, this language of art is universal. And I truly believe that together we can have a better impact. Earlier today, someone was mentioning that from space, we are a team, planet Earth team, human team. Sometimes it's very difficult to see this in our world, but I believe that with a project like this, we have a better view of what we can do as a team. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
It gives me so much hope. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Carly Weiner from the Schmidt Ocean Institute. Oh, there she is. Here we are.
Thank you. Hey, what? It is a little bright up here. The good news is I think I'm the last person standing between you and drinks and the arts, so I will keep it brief. But I did want to express how excited Schmidt Ocean Institute is to be here this week at our Basel, Miami for our first time and here at the Frost Museum. It's a huge stepping stone for us, elevating our arts program to a different level and bringing the importance of the ocean to a new crowd. Our goal is to meet people where their interests lie and connect them to marine science in unique and creative ways. Our research vessel, Falcor 2, has already proved itself a platform for artistic and scientific pursuit in the inaugural year that we've had. In just 10 months, we've already made 10 discoveries, a seamount taller than the world's tallest building, a new ecosystem underneath the seafloor, a deep-sea octopus nursery, one of 5 in the world, and so on and so on. And we were able to share these discoveries and amazing wonders of our ocean through the Artist at Sea program, bringing artists to work alongside scientists on our research vessel. Tonight, you will experience firsthand what results when creative expression meets cutting-edge science. We have come a long way since we sailed with our first artists in 2015, and we look forward to continuing to expand our program our cohort of artists, and our exhibitions. As you view the collection we have here tonight, you are helping create a collaborative community, bringing together arts and science as we boldly explore our unknown planet. I want to extend a huge amount of gratitude to John Steele at Nautilus, who, without him, this event would not take place, for Victor Jeffries for all his work behind the scenes. I want to recognize our partners at UNESCO and all that they are doing to promote the ocean through the Decade of Ocean Sciences for Sustainable Development. We are honored to have UNESCO Madam Director General Audrey Azoulay with us here this evening, and a big thank you to Frost Museum for hosting us. I also want to acknowledge Bertarelli Foundation and S.C. Johnson for adding to the program today, and certainly, but not least, I would like to acknowledge the talented artists, some who we have here today from our collection. Rebecca Rutstein, Lizzie Tabor, Carol Mickett and Robert Stackhouse, Jane McCarthy representing Taiji Terasaki Studios, Michael Drogue, and Runa Ray. I am so excited for everybody to see the art today. We have it in 2 different locations, both in the Shark Gallery and the Ocean Gallery. We will be around if you have any questions. I encourage everybody to come join us again on Friday at 1 p.m. for a panel with our artists here in the planetarium, and then on Saturday evening from 6 to 8 for a film night. Please use the opportunity this week to take in the Artist at Sea collection, a gateway to our ocean world for greater perspective, knowledge, and more compassion for our underwater ecosystems. Please continue to follow our expeditions as well, schmidtocean.org, and we look forward to sharing more adventures with you. Thank you and enjoy your evening.
That concludes this part of the fun, and now we invite you all to go outside and have a drink. Thank you to everyone who spoke and the wonderful musician who shared his mastery of the violin. Have a lovely evening. Yeah.